Abby and Richard from Microsoft MakeCode here to talk about blocks localization. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richard from the MakeCode team.
I'm Joey from the MakeCode team.
And we're going to be talking a little bit about how we do our blocks localization. So I think we're kind of unique in how we generate our blocks, and so our localization is kind of unique as well. And we don't use Blockly's translations or localization mechanisms. So hopefully some of this will be helpful to you, but let's get started. So we're going to give a brief intro on what MakeCode is, if you haven't heard of us before. And we're also going to be talking about how our localization works, some of the benefits to kind of our approach, and some things that we've run into and some things we're looking into for the future. So with that, let's get started. I think most people are familiar with MakeCode, but if you're not, we are a learn to code thing, big surprise. And our main targets are for the microbit, Minecraft education, and then a retro video game programming thing we have called Arcade. And one of the big things that kind of differentiates MakeCode is that we have blocks and text as kind of first-class experiences in our app. So you can go back and forth between blocks or JavaScript and Python. And that also goes a big way into how we actually generate blocks. So another thing is, because we're a learn to code thing, we're used in a whole lot of places. We are used in over 200 countries, 39 languages. And we have a team of kind of open source translators and approvers who do all of this localization work because they're passionate about our project and the things that we do. So how does our localization work? Well, we use a service called Crowdin, which you may have seen. It's used by a lot of open source projects. It's a tool for crowdsourcing localizations. Basically, translations can be submitted by anybody for your app. And we have a team of trusted approvers that we kind of nominate for different languages, who then say, yes, this translation is good and trusted. We're going to let it into the product. So as we mentioned before, our community of translators and approvers, they have localized our web app, our documentation, and our blocks in over like 39 languages. Some more than others, but we have pretty good coverage these days. So before we get into how the localization works, we have to talk a little bit about how MakeCode projects work. So MakeCode projects, I mean, most people when they're interacting with MakeCode, they just have a blocks file and some text files that they're kind of editing. But really, they work most like any coding project where you have a bunch of different source files that kind of make up the project that are behind the scenes. So we have TypeScript, C++, and blocks. And all of the blocks that show up in our toolbox and in our workspace are actually generated dynamically from the text files in a project, which is great because it makes MakeCode very flexible for adding extensions and things like that. But it also means that every block corresponds to a function in the source code. And the way we generate those blocks is by annotating those functions. So we're going to be taking a look at this block here, which is this radio send value thing. It's from our microbit editor. And if we look at how this block is actually defined, there's kind of three parts to this. So up at the top here, we have this JS doc. So this is the documentation that shows up in a text thing when you're getting kind of completions and stuff like that. But we also show this to block users. And then we have this block metadata down here in the middle, which is kind of used to define the actual shape of the block and things like that. And then finally, down at the bottom, we have the implementation, which I left out because it's boring, but it's there too. So there are three parts of this that we kind of send to our localization pipeline. One of them is the actual block string. So this looks very similar to when you're defining a block using JSON and the like. So we have this two arguments, name and value, and this string gets sent to translators, and they can move the arguments around to make it grammatically correct for whatever language they are translating, as long as they have the names match in the end. Every block also has a help file, so if you right-click in the context menu, we have a help option that loads a markdown file, which gives more detailed thing. It gives usage examples and things like that. So we also link that in that annotation right there. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we have that JS doc up at the top, which generates the tooltip that shows up when you hover over the block. And doing it this way is really nice because the JS doc is also what shows up in our text editors. Text editors know how to display JS doc in a nice, context-sensitive way. And because we integrate that into the blocks as well, it means we can keep everything in one place. And it's all next to the source where all of this code is in your project. So we take all of this JS doc, block definitions, and markdown. We munge them all into a bunch of files. We upload that to Crowdin. and our approvers and translators do their work. From there, we put it into a database that we maintain, and we update this once a day, which is actually really nice. It means that when people are doing translating work, they can see their translations in the next day. It's very motivating for a lot of our translators. If they're working on a class or something and they want to be able to show off the work that they've been doing, they can do it pretty much the next day as long as their translations have been approved. And then finally, we move that down into our web app, and we cache everything locally in IndexedDB, so you don't have to be online as long as you've gone once. We really value our offline scenario because we know that schools often have problems with internet and the like.
Okay. So another thing that comes with this is MakeCode extensions. So in MakeCode, if you make a project, if you have some blocks and you want to share them with your friend, you can just go to JavaScript, add a // block, and it will just turn that into a block that goes into the toolbox. If you share that code, they can add it to their project and load it in that way. MakeCode extensions are usually stored on GitHub, besides just the shared URL that you can throw away. And they can be created by anyone, and they do not go through our localization pipeline. They don't go through Crowdin because they can't upload to Crowdin through our account. So we have to have something else for that. So for extension translation, we have two options available pretty much. We can generate the same JSON blobs you can see up there. That's what it looks like in the behind the scenes on Crowdin. And they can translate it in that way. That is kind of tedious for users. You have to remember to go update that after you've made changes in your code. It's not quite as easy. But the other option that we have is also to translate it inline, just like the other block annotations. This is from an extension that I made that just makes little status bars on arcade games so you can see my health went down. A user who is Russian decided to translate that so that his kids could use it in their game without having to understand English.
Yeah, and having this translation mechanism for extensions is really big for us because a lot of times the extensions that we get for things like the microbit are made by, say, an robotics manufacturer in China, and they want to make sure that all of their stuff has a first-class experience in China, so they can provide all of their translations, in line, which is really useful. Okay, so what are some good and bad things and things that we're looking for with this approach? So first off, what's been really good about this is that it's crowdsourced by humans. Very often we'll have some hero teacher in a specific locale who will just go in and translate our entire editor, and suddenly we can go from having nothing to turning on, Guamanian the next day, which is great. The immediate updates that we have with our system, them showing up immediately, really motivates people. And we get a lot of people who watch our changes very closely. So every time we change a block, they will immediately send us another translation update, and they will ping us on GitHub if we do not do that. So it's very important to localize those. We have much broader language coverage than we ever could have hoped to if we were paying for these translations to happen. So that's been really great for us. What's not been as good is that our documentation is a combination of text and code snippets. So because we are crowdsourcing this and a lot of folks are not familiar with how MakeCode works internally, we get a lot of people trying to translate code and things like that. And it's yeah, you can't really translate the word for in a for loop. It gets a little complicated. And so we do our best to kind of delineate these things and make it clear what should be and should not be translated. But because these are people who are not familiar with our system, it's always a battle kind of back and forth to make sure that we are properly kind of fencing the code so that they don't run into those issues. The other thing is, while we're really proud of our approval network that we've kind of made up, it's still a bottleneck for these translations. We're relying on volunteers here, and so if someone has to step away for whatever reason, that can really block a certain language until we end up finding someone to be a replacement. Most of our languages are only partially translated because, again, these are volunteers doing this work. If we decide to change a block, also, this is just kind of the name of the game with localization, we instantly lose all of its translations, and because we're not doing the translations ourselves, we just have to wait for people to notice that and to backfill them, which they typically do pretty quickly, but it does mean that sometimes, again, if you have someone who kind of stepped away from the project, you'll go back to Russian and all of the new blocks will not be translated, but the old ones will, and yeah. For some locales, that's not a huge thing, but for some other ones, they really do not like seeing English in the UI, which is fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So something else that we've been looking at that we've implemented is using AI translations in our workflow. So we don't just put these in front of users right away. That doesn't feel good. We don't feel confident in that one. But what we do is upload them to Crowdend as normal translations, just as a user would, and then allow the proofreaders to approve them in that way. The benefits there is that we can give it good examples to say, you can translate this, but if you translate this thing, it's going to break, and just that's part of the prompt. And so in things like this, you can see that it is properly translating the blocks for Spanish, I believe, and it is not making mistakes that a human translator might make just because they have to have a lot of rules in their mind when they're using it, and they're mostly just there to fix it for their kid. You can see right there that that is me approving one translation. This is kind of the proofreader bottleneck because I went in to find an example to take a screenshot of for the presentation and realized that there had been a few waiting for multiple months. Unfortunately, that is still the bottleneck. We have to improve that part, but it gets rid of the low-hanging fruit and it lets the proofreaders just go through it all, which is nice.
Yeah, and we've found that the LLMs respond very well to instructions and examples for this translation job specifically. So they're pretty good at recognizing these parts that they should not be translating, which was a really good surprise. So we're hoping to kind of roll this out more in the future to backfill some of those gaps in languages where we don't necessarily have 100% coverage. And yeah, that's it for our talk. If anyone has any questions, we're happy to answer them.